A lot of you asked the question and we were forced to find an answer. The question was, how did the inventor of the clock know what time it was? Please be with us so we can go look for an answer. On December 31st, 2016, the world clocks were pushed forward for 1 second, and this 1 second was after 12 a.m. You might say this 1 second is nothing, but we have to say it affects a lot of things, especially the stock market, GPS, and satellites, and anything important that's time related gets affected. But there's nothing else we could do, it has to be done. This usually happens every 2 to 5 years. The rotation of the Earth with these 1 seconds gets more exact. But let's learn the history of timekeeping. Humans have made a lot of different types of clocks. We can go from the sun, which sunset and sunrise showed what time it was. Or they would put a stick in the dirt and see where the shadow is. Rocks, water, spring, or any other tool we use to measure the time. The first clock that humans made were this thing you see right here, and it's called a sundial. And they would put a stick in the ground and see the shadow, and the Egyptians were the first ones to figure this out. Around 3500 BCE, this style of clock was famous. But this timekeeping is not accurate at all. If it's cloudy, it's no good. Second of all, when the seasons change, the spot of the sun in the sky changes as well, and you can never predict where the sun will be. You see this stick in the dirt? Until the 17th century, it was the most used clock in the world, and in different types of the world, they would look at the time like this. But we also have to say, the time wasn't as important back then, and it wasn't as important as today. When the sun came up, people would get up and do stuff, and when the sun sets, they would go home and go to sleep. Time back then wasn't like time today, like I'll meet you at 3. They would usually plan at night or day, like they would plan in the beginning of the sunrise, middle of the day, when the sun is setting. This was the style of timekeeping. You might ask, how did people that live in the Nordic countries or the North Pole keep time? We have to say that they didn't care about the time because they didn't really have a civilization. These were clocks, but humans made timers as well, and they could time things to see how long it takes to do something. The Chinese were the first people to invent timers, a timer that would work with water. This old timer would work like a drip system, so it would start from the top and work its way down slowly, and in the end it will hit the final barrel, and the final cylinder had markings on it, and when the water would come up and hit a type of degree, they would just say, oh, this is 1 hour, so 1 hour has passed. There were timers that would work with candles. It would be on a candle holder, and however long it burned, it would show on that board. Or the most famous timer of all time, hourglass, and when you turn it around, it restarts. You could say the Portuguese were the first people to invent the mechanical clock, and it would work with gears and springs, and each movement was like 1 second. The Europeans were in the oceans, and they were going everywhere in the world. One thing that was very important for them, and they always had issues, was time. Because these old school clocks would not work on the sea, and the sundials wouldn't work either because it wouldn't be accurate at all. But whatever they did, they couldn't invent something that would work on a ship. And that was when the British hit the seas. And they told themselves if they can't calculate time, they're gonna lose to the Spanish and Portuguese. And that is why the British government in 1714 put out a flyer that we will give 20,000 pounds for whoever that can tell the time on a ship. Anybody that knew anything about timekeeping and clocks got onto it. Do you know why? Because 20,000 pounds in that time was an insane amount of money. If you want to calculate it in today's pounds, it will be 2,600,000 pounds. A lot of invented invented different types of clock, but the winner and the best design belonged to John Harrison. This guy basically invented the pocket watch and he named it H4. He really deserved that 20,000 pounds because he created something that was revolutionary. It worked with adjusting and springs, and in 24 hours, it would lose 1 second. And what he did was very valuable. This tiny watch allowed the British Army to really beat the Portuguese and Spanish in timekeeping. They've always said it, you gotta spend money to make money. They gave 20,000 pounds, but it caused them to be a global superpower. This style of timekeeping was used for years, and that's when in 1960 the quartz clock was invented. Quartz is basically silicon dioxide. The good thing about quartz is that when you give it electricity, it begins to move. In a quartz clock or watch, there's a tiny amount of this material in there, and with the help of a battery, it works. And it's a lot more accurate than a spring watch. But don't think that the quartz watch was 100% accurate. A quartz watch loses 15 seconds every month. If you remember, the old spring clocks would lose 1 second every 24 hours, and that's 30 seconds a month. The quartz divided that number by 2. Even though the quartz watch was more advanced, it was not that accurate, and that's why next to it, they were trying to invent something better, and that's when they invented the atomic clock. Just like John Harrison's watch that was like a revolution, the atomic clock was a revolution on its own, and that was in the 1960s as well. This clock is so accurate that the Earth can't keep up, because the Earth is not as accurate. Like for example, when it rotates around the sun, every year is not the same, but the atomic clock doesn't make mistakes like that or go up and down. An atomic clock works with microwaves, and that's how accurate it is because it works with microwaves. They say this type of clock would not make a mistake in 300 million years. It seems like we found out the exact time. You think it's like that? We have to say no, because the Earth doesn't work alongside us, and each rotation is not the same as the other. And this is exactly why some years we have to push the clocks forward 1 second, so it's accurate alongside planet Earth. The next time we have to do this is in 2 months, meaning December 31st, 2021. The time being this accurate is not for you and I. This time keeps everything in order in the world. Do you guys know the main clock in the world is in Greenwich, England? From this clock, if you go towards the west, the time goes forward, and however much you go towards the west, the time goes backwards. Basically, the world clock goes off this thing. But what's the answer to that first question we asked in the beginning? How did the inventor of the clock know what time it was? From the sun. Even though it's not as accurate as you think, but you can find the exact time like that. And when John Harrison was making his watch, he adjusted it with the sun.